Hello, Loddie. Welcome to the Women Waken podcast.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Winnie.
Very excited to have you on the show, Loddie. We've been having a delightful time talking already. We jumped on our call about 25 minutes ago and have been having a lot of fun. So let's keep the fun going and
Sounds good.
let's hear all about you. So, Loddie, I'm already really excited about exploring and hearing more about your work. You are a poet, a storyteller, and you're a creator of Soul Riders, storybooks for your inner child. Amazing. How wonderful is it? So it's storybooks for adults?
Yeah, exactly. Just like we used to have picture books when we were kids,
Yeah.
and you would turn the page and there was lovely illustrations and also words. It's that same feel, but it's for adults. So don't get this for your kids. It's like very adult content.
Whoops. You put it in your stocking accidentally. Oh, I guess that's not what I thought it was. I can't wait to hear more about that. And then also, you are the founder of Know Your Worth, which is a leadership development platform for women. And you also serve as the president of the Imagine Fund, which is a nonprofit that's advancing equity in gender, health, education, and food access. Lottie, so cool. You're doing some cool
I am living the fun life, I have to say.
stuff. Yeah. So why don't we start by you taking us back to where things begin, as far as you'd like to go. I'm always curious, where were you born? Where were you raised? What was your early life like? What is your inner child's hangups? What are, that have helped you to heal? Where did it begin?
Well, I'll go brief and you can let me know where you want to go deeper.
Okay.
So I was actually born amidst the tumult of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. So I was born in Tehran, Iran. And my father was one of the leaders and the intellects who was like, hey, we can't abuse, people in the public this way. And he tried to speak up in very peaceful ways, but unfortunately was captured for his views. And as you can imagine, not all governments in the world appreciate hearing diverse views about what they're doing. So he was actually executed when I was very young. And my mother and I came to the US and got political asylum. So we took nothing but our lives with us. We had to restart completely. She is literally the font of resilience. If you were to look up resilience in the dictionary, I think my mother's picture should be in there because she raised me by herself in a country where she was relearning the culture, the language. She couldn't bring her educational credits over. She was at a top university studying engineering, and so she couldn't bring any of that over. She had to start from scratch. And so we were really poor, as you can imagine, when we came with nothing. Political asylum just means that you're allowed to live somewhere. You have to figure out yourself how you're going to obviously survive. And so the earliest parts of my lives, I didn't realize until much later, but the first few decades of my life were basically just about survival. And I didn't realize how much of that trauma had actually stayed with me. And it ended up shaping and defining so much. So, when you're an immigrant child, one of the best ways to security and something my mother certainly encouraged a lot was education. And so it was actually the that part of me that needed safety and security that ended up then, doing really well in college and going and getting a PhD in engineering and going and doing postdoctoral work. By the way, that's the whole reason, the funny reason behind my website, Doc Foose. It's the doctorate, the postdoctorate. And it's also just like poking a bit of fun, right? It sounds like Duck Duck Goose. It's like let's not take ourselves too seriously, even if we get a bunch of, degrees or accreditations or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was really the early part, and that ended up turning into that same seeking safety and a place to be and a place to really be able to just have security for myself and my family, kept that type A thing going. And so I went all the way through and grew mostly in the healthcare industry. I spent 2 decades in the healthcare industry and I became a multinational business leader. So I was leading a large business in public health and vaccines where I had employees in all sorts of different places. I was responsible for markets in Asia, Latin America, parts of Europe and Middle East, lots of travel, totally hectic. I was on in the early mornings, 5 a.m. calls with Europe, and then I'd be 9 p.m. calls with Korea and, everything in between. So, and I didn't realize at the time how much of that was actually still stemming from that place that, all of this started, which was just a deep need for security, because of what had happened in my own childhood.
Thank you so much for sharing, Loddie. How old were you when your dad passed?
He was executed probably when I was about a year and a half to 2 years old. My mother says, so I was just, in the early phases of being able to speak, the native Persian tongue, right? You're little, you're kind of still toddling about and talking a little. And she says that every day, right around when he was expected to come home, even though I couldn't tell time, I would go and stand at the window and wait for him. Like my connection with him was so deep, even at that early age. Probably like some people's puppies. I was the puppy going to the window and waiting for, Baba to show up. And so even though I can't now as an adult, like remember those memories of him, the energetic imprint of that love is still very alive within me.
Have you had times where you felt his presence? Do you have ever have incidences of, spiritual contact or connection or guidance? Do you ever feel that he's with you?
Not in the human sense. And one of the things that, as I've evolved in my own spirituality, I've started to feel is there's like an underlying energetic fabric that connects all of us. And there are times where him is part of it, but actually everyone is part of it. I feel really tuned into that energy. So simple places, if I go to, for example, a place where people are dancing and enjoying themselves publicly, and like just really alive with it. So I'm not talking about like a drunken hall. I'm talking about like people who are actually like fully consciously present for their joy while they're doing things like dancing. I'll feel within me this energy just rise. And I know that it's an energy that's not just mine. It's like I'm feeling our collective joy. And it's the same thing I felt when, we were doing other like present movement in, large meditation halls, things like that. You start to be able to tap into that energy field that's beyond just your own. And it's beautiful. So yeah, I consider him part of it, but, I don't connect just with that, him as an individual.
Yeah. And where did you all live when you first arrived here? Just you and your mom?
Oh my goodness. I mean, we spent a little bit of time with my uncle, but they really couldn't like have us in the home for that long. And then I remember like really early on, and it's like I can barely remember these things, but we would like sleep in different places where like my mom was taking on extra jobs. She worked like multiple jobs, while also like eventually going back and continuing her education just so that we could have enough, so that we could eat. I remember she would always make sure that I was fed first, because you didn't always have as much as you would like on the table. And it's those beautiful things, right? Like my father sharing with me that you could love other people beyond your own physical life. And if that feels true and right for you, then that's your path, right? He knew what he was getting into and he chose to make those sacrifices. It's my mom showing me that resilience is something that's often fueled by our love for someone else. After she lost her soulmate in such a traumatic way, the thing that she says that kept her alive was basically her love for me. Um, it's these things that are gifts to us from others. And
Yeah.
it's, you see, it's not just the joys, right? It's also the pains and the sorrows that we move through. And that's what opens us up. If I hadn't ever opened up beyond, oh, I'm a multinational executive and, this is my career path, and then I couldn't have entered this next chapter, which has been so unexpected. Right? None of this was a product of the intellect. It was all a product of the heart. This is the space that my deepest self wanted to invite me into.
Yeah. Wow, beautiful. What a remarkable, unique story.
I know it surprised you, Annie, because I think we we never covered off on that when we were doing our pre-interview. So I
Oh.
saw your eyes go wide when I shared. sort of the earliest start to my life.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense, your passion, but also you have this bright spirit. And you said that your father knew what he wanted to stand for. And I think that's something that's either it's obviously very powerful, of course, but just it feels he led with his heart, is what I'm hearing. Because if you, I mean, like you said, everything is all connected. I'm not that I'm, ready to go tomorrow, but there's no I don't we just transition. We're just energy. And so I've thought about it a lot. I put my voice out through my podcast, but I hope to do more of it in my lifetime in other ways because I feel the same way as this. I have this chance. I'm here for a reason, and I think it's to speak up because there's a lot of things that can be spoken up about at this time that are important. What could be a better thing to stand for than that, at all cost? Because the thing is, they can't silence us forever. They can get rid of us, but they can't silence the human spirit and soul. And that's what it sounds like your father was speaking to, is that it's
Mm.
important how we treat people. And people don't want to hear that because it's inconvenient a lot of the time. I, I mean, how many instances in history have people said, no, we just get rid of them. They're a problem. And few people will stand up to that because it's scary. So yeah, that's just powerful. So yeah, got me. But that's yeah, it's remarkable.
It is beautiful. And it's something that can shape us in simple ways in each moment. Sometimes people look at things that are happening in the world and they feel powerless, right? But none of us is powerless. Everything that we do, everything that we say, each interaction we have has influence and ripples beyond ourselves. Like my father's ripples are still emanating because his ripples are part of my ripples. Like I don't think that if I hadn't had that start in life, I would be where I am today and doing the work with nonprofits that I'm doing today. All of this influences each other.
Beautiful. So speaking on that, so you had this job as a executive in healthcare industry and you were able to travel. So obviously based on your history, you already knew a lot about different cultures other than the US because you came here. When did your eyes really open to that? When you look back, you can see were sort of the stepping stones towards the work you do today. When was the first time you felt drawn? Was it a place you visited or an aspect of your work that you thought, oh, there's something here that excites me, that lights me up a little bit? I think there's something here.
It's funny because I can see now how everything's tied together, but it was not like an intellectual linear thing at all. So, even when I was in the healthcare industry, there's a large not-for-profit that tries to advance the role of women in healthcare because women make up about two-thirds of the healthcare workforce, but are in a very small percentage of leadership positions. And so this nonprofit organization focuses on elevating women's roles. And so I already was getting more and more involved in that space and found that investing in other women was actually helping me get over my own setbacks and hurdles. Like you may hear, oh, you were a multinational business leader. Surely you were very forward spoken and very comfortable and all these things. But over the course of my career, there were so many stories of me actually feeling smaller or feeling like, I couldn't live into that potential. Like, we talk about imposter syndrome with women. I had all of those same things. And the thing that started to get me over it was actually realizing my passion. So when I started investing in women, coaching and developing others, I founded a group called Women in Healthcare Give Back that was really about leveraging our collective power, skills, interests, voices, and partnering with nonprofits to be able to achieve more for others. And as I did this, some of those layers of narrative that were holding me back from my own potential started to fall away. But it wasn't until, and I know you're going to love this story, Winnie. It wasn't until a few years ago that I really had this beautiful dark night of the soul. There was so much stuff, so much stress, so much pressure on me. And it was just incredibly draining. So it was just one of those, like, shake your fists up at the sky kind of dark night of the soul things. And what came out of it was really unexpected. So, um, I basically started shortly after. So again, I didn't choose any of this. It felt like I more stepped into it. I started to hear poetry through my heart. I don't have a better way of explaining it than that. And remember, I was trained as an engineer, so I had never written poetry in my life.
Oh, you
I
weren't a writer. You weren't.
No, not at all. The last creative writing I ever did was like when they required me to do in like high school. That was it. And then these poems started coming through, and like one of the earliest ones that I'll share with you said, "Something inside me has broken, and I cannot seem to stop the waters of my love song." Now I reflect on that now and I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. It's about awakening. But at the time, I was like, what is going on? What does this even mean? And so these poems, like, they just seemed like, I would walk under a tree and I would hear a poem. I would wake up in the middle of the night hearing a poem. And so all I did was I had a journal by my bed and I would just like write furiously, again, not from the mind, but from the heart.
Yeah.
And I just hid it under my bed. I was like, oh, maybe this is what, losing it looks like. You just start hearing
You must
poetry.
be crazy if you're writing beautiful sonnets. That's just like, that's weird. Something's real wrong here.
Well, like my intellectual mind just couldn't make
Yeah.
any sense of it. I was like, this is like, what? What is happening? But that actually ended up, that poetry overlapped with me actually leaving my corporate job, which was a huge decision. I was the career leader for my family. We had literally done relocations because of my jobs. And stepping into a space where I was willing to just sit in stillness. It's like my heart had a set of instructions in it. I felt no desire at all to go and look for other jobs. I did not feel interested at all when headhunters would reach out, right? Because when you first step out of your role, they're all kind of reaching out to see if they can put you in another similar role. And I just felt called to do more hiking in the next few weeks than I had in all the years prior. It was like a recalibration for my nervous system.
Where were you
And it
living at the time with
changed.
your family? You had a
On the
family at the
East
time?
Coast,
Where?
uh, in Jersey, there's like a part of Jersey we call the Pharma Corridor. It's where like a lot of the healthcare executives live.
Okay. I was in Jersey for quite a bit a few years ago. Is it anywhere on the coast? Not the Jersey Shore. Is it more inland?
Yeah, you know where Morristown is? That's
Yes.
probably like the closest.
Okay.
That kind of summit, those areas.
Yeah.
Um,
So suddenly, all of a sudden, you had been probably focused on Excel sheets and reports and Zoom, or probably not Zoom, but calls. And then you just wanted to go to the hills and write poetry and put it under your mattress.
well,
Did
it
you talk?
sounds just
What did your husband think? Was he like, oh, did you said you were the breadwinner? Was he working as well, or was he
he
standing with
was,
you?
yeah, he was, but I was the income and the job leader at that time.
Okay.
And I mean, we had a discussion about it and he said to me, and this is where I love that the soul guidance was just there even when I wasn't ready for it. He said to me, "So if I wasn't working, would you still be doing this? Because it's a big decision, right? That's a
Yeah.
huge chunk of our family's income." And I looked at him and I didn't think the answer. It just sort of came up from deep within me. And the answer was yes, even if I had to sleep on people's couches. Now, we were nowhere near me needing to sleep on people's couches, right? Like, he and I had both worked, we had saved up money, we were doing fine. But that answer coming from deep within was saying to me, hey, don't be afraid. There is so much room to play here. And guess what? The bottom, it doesn't bottom out. That can't be where you set your expectations. So that's actually been, I think, a really important teaching for me, even beyond giving that response to him. It was like me giving that response to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a bold statement. It's like,
It is.
I would sleep on people's couches. I'll be couch surfing if I need to. Okay. All right. But yeah, but I think that there's a power in that because it is, well, it's a surrender, right? It's a surrender to
It
saying,
is.
listen, I could end up jumping off the cliff and hitting bottom on someone's couch, or something's going to catch me. I think it's going to be the latter. So I'm going to go for it, right? That kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it's a permission to let go of fear. And that's what we each need to allow ourselves. So this is a funny side story. When I
Yay.
was much younger, at some point I had always felt called to spirituality, even though I wasn't part of any major religion. And I said to my mom, I think I want to be a minister when I grow up. And my mom, who had gone through so much trauma, obviously we had been through a lot together, and security was still big for her. She was like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna end up sleeping on the streets. Like you're gonna be so poor." Now, okay, it's obviously ministers are not sleeping on the streets, but although some of them, maybe they don't have the ministry title of a church or something like that, but they're doing their own form of ministry, and maybe they are actually on the streets. But the point is this, right? That was fear talking. And fear tries to keep us small by wrapping us in these types of narratives. So saying something like, I would just sleep on people's couches, it's not that I'm actually going to do that. And I've never had to worry about doing that at this stage, but it's just about letting go of the fears around scarcity that we often surround ourselves with, those myths of what life has to be, what it has to look like. And the truth is, if you think that abundance comes with a certain number of zeros, on a bank account, you're never going to feel abundant. You're never going to feel secure. Abundance is a mindset and it stems from deep within the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that trust that the universe is infinite and infinitely abundant. Do you really think it's going to drop you on your ass? And it's funny, Lottie, because I just yesterday I was having a moment and I was like, because I have fear, and my fear is nothing will happen unless I make it happen. If
Mm.
I step back, I won't be supported. Things will not come together. And I, I thought, what if nothing happens this year? What if there's nothing that happens and I end up at the end of this year and nothing has happened? But then I took a second and I was like, when was the last time you had a year where nothing happened? That's not never happened. But it's again, it's that fear that says, oh, I can't just trust. I can't just go and do something and just let go of control. I have to make things happen or else they won't. And that really is a lack of knowledge that we are a part, the same thing as energy. We're a part of a very beautiful, intricate design. And it's also not all about us. We tend to have,
Mm.
I definitely struggle with it. This idea of like, I got to take care of myself and I make sure things work out and I make things happen. But we are intricately intertwined and involved with everything around us. So the universe has plans for us, not just for us, but because we are meant to be involved in things that want to come to life, right? So it sounds like what was calling from you was, I feel there are things I'm meant to be involved in because there's this wanting to write poetry. Well, poetry is a gift to anybody who reads it, right? Wanting to be a minister, where I feel this draw to share inspirational words and guidance, support to others.
And you know what's beautiful, Whitney, is if we are willing to listen, those calls will keep coming back over and over again, right? They don't expire. So even though I obviously did not go to school for ministry, and I instead ended up, an engineer, went into business, uh, in its own way, ministry is still coming into life now for me. And it just looks very different, right? It looks like running the leadership development program for women. It looks like the mystic poetry and the books for inner children. It looks like the nonprofit fund that elevates women and people all over the world. It looks like the partnership that I do with this amazing global nonprofit, just as a volunteer. I just love their mission called the Hunger Project. It looks like all of those things, and it's always there. So we don't have to wait for it, but we do have to still ourselves a bit. And in the modern life that, like you said, is constantly encouraging us to do, that willingness to create the space. And what do I mean by space? It looks different for different people. Yeah, sometimes it looks like sitting on a meditation cushion, but sometimes it looks like going out for a walk. Sometimes it looks like making yourself a cup of tea and actually noticing each sip, the temperature, the flavors, the scents. It's about coming into the present moment and recognizing that the only truth there is exists for us in the present moment. In fact, you can only ever plan for the future in the present moment, right? In the past, it's just like memories. It's like old energies of something that was. So you can tap into it when you need it, but you don't need to sit there in the do-overs we often run through our minds, like, oh, if only this, or oh, what about this? What about this? We're either worried about the past or worried about the future. We're seldom sitting in the beauty and the infinite potential that only exists in the present moment.
Yeah. And that's because on either side of the present moment is fear. And a quote that I love that I share a lot on the show is fear holds on and love lets go. And most
Mm.
of us feel almost all the time that we need to be holding on. Okay, I feel, I don't know, okay, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm gonna look at the past. I'm gonna ruminate over a mistake I made 10 years ago for like 3 hours. It'll be great. Oh, what's gonna happen next week? What am I gonna do? No, rarely do any of us, especially nowadays with our phones and everything. Like we don't just sit here in the stillness and just let ourselves be. Because like you said, our entire existence is made up of a moment just like this one. Yet we spend most of our time just getting through these moments, not even acknowledging it. And when you spoke to the fact that you started, getting guidance for things, and then once you get the guidance, it doesn't just go away. It's not like a one-time offer. It's once you open that avenue, because I always offer to people that we are constantly surrounded by inspiration, guidance, pure love, but most of us don't pay attention. We're not even looking. So the second that we do say, hey, what was that? I think I just got, and I call it our angels, our guides, but they're like, oh, great, she's listening now. Great, her channel's open. She's really going to stop fixating on how she looks or, whether or not this thing's going to work out. She's listening to us. So
Mm.
then you'll get these messages, you'll get guidance, you'll get inspiration. You'll decide to go to a certain coffee shop one day and meet somebody who introduces you to a new project you can work on. Things like that happen when you let yourself be present and allow the moment to kind of come to you rather than feel like you have to chase after it.
Yeah. And it's so much more inspired when it does, right? Because the intellectual mind or the egoic mind or whatever you want to call it, the smaller self within us that over identifies with just our physical form, our name, our stories, our history, that is iterative. It looks at things on the in the past and it tries to build the future based on what it knows, what it's heard. But true creativity, bringing forth something that is uniquely ours to bring forward, something that's new and different and has its own life and energy pulsating, that comes from a much deeper place. And so, whether you want to call it your highest self, your deepest self, whatever direction you want to go with that, these are just words. And at the end of the day, that spacious place of potential is what we're each tapping into in those greatest moments of creativity, whether we're, doing something like woodworking or whether we're designing a business, it doesn't matter what it is. We're bringing our full self into it by letting go into that spirit of, let's call it co-creation with the universe. That sounds like a fun way to say it.
Yeah, co-creation with the universe, which is infinite potential.
Yeah.
Right? Anything that could ever be can be, and it's all just sitting out there, waiting for someone to say, "Hey, can I take a look at this?" We pull everything from infinite potential and bring it into being. This microphone exists because one day somebody was like, "I think it's possible to create this contraption where you speak into it and it, projects your voice and it records it." That's an insane idea to somebody 200 or however many, right?
It is. Yeah.
That was insane, but somebody believed in it. And guess what? Anything, if you can believe it, it exists because the universe is infinite. There's no true laws in terms of, oh, no, no, that's not possible. Literally anything is possible. So when we allow ourselves to kind of let go, like you said, not of our standard ideas and the beliefs we hold on to limit us, right?
Mhm.
I was speaking to you earlier about how I plan to do more traveling this year abroad. And I caught myself as I was making plans thinking automatically, well, I probably won't meet anybody and I'll probably have a hard time with this or that, and it'll probably not be that beneficial. Weird things to think about, but it's because I'm pulling from the past. I'm pulling from my typical protective measures, right? Oh, that's not going to work out, like an Eeyore mindset. I don't do it as much anymore, but you understand what I'm saying is that we typically just work with the same beliefs, but nothing that's happened in the past has to dictate the future if we can change our mindset. Somebody who's struggled their whole life with making ends meet can suddenly become a millionaire if they're able to shift into the recognition that there is no lack in the universe or in this moment. There's always abundance. Once you open that valve, you won't close it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, so many people are kept from it, and indirectly or maybe directly, I believe that's probably a lot of the aim and purpose of your work and my work, which is allow people to kind of look at, well, what could you be? What could you do if you didn't think there was any limits? If you didn't have presupposed notions about how things will work out, what could be possible?
Yeah. And I love what you said, Whitney. And it reminds me actually of something I've said as well before. The past does not dictate the future. We do. We do. And as we step into that space of leadership play, as we step into that space of creativity, and we allow ourselves to surrender into it and make it joyful, just like when we were children, if kids had the same mentality that adults have about worrying about mistakes, kids would never get up after the first time they fell down. Right? Oh, I scraped my knee. I'm never doing that again. I'm not gonna try that walking thing. Let that woman over there who keeps carrying me around, let her just keep carrying me around for the next few years. But so, how do we go back to that space of innocence, recognizing that even the things that seem like setbacks, whether it's scraping your knee, losing a job, a relationship shifting on you, how do those things actually open us up? And that's what, I talked about that dark night of the soul that like led to this poetry, and I had no idea what was happening. That was okay. That was a different part of myself waking up and saying, okay, great. We did the analytical, engineering, business, whatever stuff. Here's some other things we have inside. Did you know that we had poetry inside? Did you know that we had stories inside? Did you know that we had all this other fun stuff waiting to happen? And, just like the first time I started writing down the poems, I was like, wait, am I losing it? What's happening? There's no way my intellectual mind could have kept up with all of these shifts that were wanting to come from deeper within. I would never have ever thought to sit down and do creative writing, or certainly to put it in the public domain. I cared way too much what people thought of me, and that I have a very set, like simple box that, people are like, oh, there's professional intellectual Loddie. And to be able to release and say, wait a minute, there's a lot of space to play here. And then you start meeting, like you said, Whitney, you start meeting other people and opportunities and situations that open this space up further. And so the collaborations, the partnerships that I have now, other things that are unfolding in my life, none of them would have happened if it was my intellect trying to lead the charge. I would have just been in a place of, inertia. What am I doing? I'm going to keep doing tomorrow what I'm doing yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't you tell us about your first book, Hungry, which is that those collections of poems? Is that what Hungry was?
Well, it's funny because Hungry was not actually the first book, even though it precedes the writing and it precedes the other books. So the first book that I published was actually the Soul Writers, the storybooks for your inner child. And the way that came about is I was on a retreat. I was sitting by this gorgeous lake, and I said to myself, now that I'm hearing poems through my heart, I had, after doing that for many months, had learned that there was actually a heart space, almost like a state that I could enter within my own consciousness to actually hear more clearly. So I went into that space and I just said, are there stories here? Could I do that in narrative? And so that's actually how the first story came about from Soul Riders. And it was just so beautiful. And I had no idea where it was going. I had no idea where it would end. And I didn't even recognize it until after it was completely out on paper, that it was basically a healing story. It was a healing story. And it was so beautiful that even though I had never, professionally published anything in my life, I was like, I'm going to make a commitment to just see where this goes and to just listen for stories. And so that ended up being the first book. But then eventually I was like, you know what? These poems in Hungary, I don't think they're just for me. And I finally am in a space of greater self-acceptance to where I'm not worried about what other people think. And I feel comfortable actually putting these together. I just reorganized them into themes, but I kept the poems as they arose for me. And yeah, there was a publisher who was interested, and we put out the book last year. And it's just been,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Have you published all your books?
Well, actually, there's stories. So now when I travel, I listen for stories in that quiet heart space. And so some of the stories exist, but they're not published yet because I find now that I have many different things that are kind of drawing my energy. So I'm trying to like balance when each thing comes out and
Yeah.
allowing each thing to have its own kind of flow and rhythm. Yeah, and it's beautiful to be in that space of like, I can create something, but also let go of any outcomes associated with it.
That's a beautiful place to be in. That's also rare
Well,
that
it
people
is
can
a
let go of
gift.
the outcome.
I consider like everything, even that dark night of the soul, that was a gift. That's
Yeah.
like a tearing away. Sometimes we need to go through deep pain and shifts in order to actually able to just create the space needed to allow something new to enter. Like there's this beautiful poem by Rumi that's quite famous called The Guest House. And Rumi, who's one of the world's most famous uh, Persian mystic poets, just invites everyone to allow all those pains and sorrows, those injustices, everything to sweep clear our home of what's no longer needed because they're making space. These uninvited guests are making space for what's new.
Yes, absolutely. And that's been a huge challenge for me the past few years is this notion of, because it's also the idea if you are holding on to something, then you're not able to, how can you receive with closed hands? You have to open your hands and let whatever's meant to go, go. So many of us, again, fear holds on. So I have things in my life that I'm afraid to let go of because it's what I know that keeps me supported, that keeps me stable. It's scary to let go. You wonder, like you said, what if the worst happens? What if I end up on someone's couch? Damn it, I shouldn't have let that go. But at a certain point, I mean, I think all constriction is the cause of all illness. If we hold on too long to things, things start really just kind of breaking down and going bad, you know?
Mm.
So I agree. There's so many times where if we could just allow things to leave that are on their way out and not hold on, wait, no, that's when we find real change. That's when like a real rebirth can happen.
Well, I agree with you completely. And the part of us that wants to hold on is the part that's afraid. That's the egoic self, that construct that is like, I am limited to this face, this name, this history. I need to hold on to that. That's the same part that worries what's someone else going to think if I do this. If I go out and tell people my crazy idea, will they believe it or not? You know, that's the part of us that tries to keep us small. Fear is the greatest lie you've ever been told. And when we allow ourselves to open up to truth, to really open up to truth, the most difficult thing, even though it sounds easy, is what you said, it's surrender. The act of surrender is actually letting go of this belief that we are this small self. And it's instead tapping into that deepest side of us, the one that transcends that small self, transcends that physical form, transcends that temporal time. It's that deep interconnected fabric of life that we're all a beating, pulsating part of. Sometimes I use tapestry or a painting to tell that story, right? We're all these beautiful brush strokes, and we're at the same time the one making the brush strokes. It's phenomenal and strange and beautiful. And so, you know, when I still experience too what you're talking about there with those fear mindsets. But you know, what's beautiful is as I've been working and deepening my own spiritual practice, I now can see those for what they are. I'm like, oh, there's that old friend fear again. It's not real. I can still choose to move beyond it. And that also means letting go of the things that are the opposite, right? Because if we over-identify not just with things that make us feel small, but with things that make our ego kind of grow in its sense of self-concept. So, for example, awards, promotions, something in your life goes well, and you tell other people, and they're like, "Oh, kudos, that's so great." If you start forming your sense of identity around these quote unquote good things, and you're then again clinging onto them, then those also become opportunities for learning because it's going to be painful. As soon as you cling, you've got to go back into letting go. So I just practice with it. Like I've got I can't give details, but I have an industry award that there's going to be a press release coming out for next week. And one of the things when it was shared with me is that I instantly started working on like, how do I let go of this as being about me at all? How does this become about our interconnectedness? How does this become about what people can achieve when they come together to do something meaningful? Because at the end of the day, that's what accolades, promotions, all these things should serve. They should serve that highest good. So, how do we turn it back around into truth, whatever it is?
Yeah. Yeah. Yet there's also though the aspect of I don't you deserve that. Like you deserve to feel celebrated. I think people deserve to cheer each other on. And I think I think it's a balance of how you take something. When we're too attached to degrees and awards, like, well, because I have these credentials behind my name, then I'm legit. But it's also a matter of, well, I worked for these because I wanted to establish them so I can do the things I want to do in the world, right? And same with accolades and getting the recognition you got is that that's a beautiful thing. Somebody saw in you the you because it takes courage to bring forth the gifts that we have. And especially the next level is to turn them into something that benefits humanity as a whole. So I think
Mm.
it's good to celebrate, but at the same time being like, we can all rejoice in this. But everybody, I just got the picture of like we're all like a flower in a garden. So if we all cheer each other on when we're blooming a little bit, like, hey, nice bloom, then there's nothing to feel there's not that jealousy and envy, right? That's the part that I don't like about these awards and things. And it also reminds me of social media is there's nothing inherently bad about people getting recognized, but when it brings up more fear, like, oh, well, if they're good, then I must not be good, right? If
Yeah.
she got an award, that means but I believe there's a time where humanity will not do that because we genuinely will release that feeling. Because I think the only reason we feel jealous is because we believe that there's not enough. That if the zero sum game, well, if you won, then I lost. So, I don't like that either. But like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's so much wisdom in that. And that goes back to the inner child stuff, right? There's
I was
stuff.
gonna say our inner child too is like, I won that award, I got the award. But and
Yeah.
we can celebrate that. We can be like, yes, you did. And now we're gonna congratulate and help others when they get their awards, right?
Yeah, it's that whatever the inner child voice is, whether it's saying I need love, I need validation, I want to feel like I
Yeah.
matter, that's the piece that's coming up. And like you said, feeling like less than because someone has something. No one else ever being more than changes who we are. We are intrinsically at our most innate level, fully whole. And then there's all of, I like to sometimes call it like illusions or veils or shadows, these stories, these narratives that are placed over that whole self. And what we're actually doing is gently peeling back those layers to actually reveal what's always been there. So, a few years ago, right before I started going through my own transformation, I couldn't have told you that there was an inner child within me that was still very scared of not belonging, right? And that came from really early childhood stuff, like we talked about. But I would see it show up and not understand, even as a grown woman, why it was showing up. Like I have one of my public articles on leadership, which people are welcome to see. I have them posted on LinkedIn. Um, it talks about me actually going to a very, very small space when I was having this conversation with this male executive who was very upset with me for a certain reason. His own inner child stuff was coming up. And both our inner childs are in the space.
Like
And
this
they
big
did
corporate setting about these big important healthcare laws and your inner children.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Just
Right. It
two
was this
children.
inner unhealed stuff inside that came up for both of
And
us.
the wild thing I'll just say really quick is when we think about the political stage, that's literally 80% of it. You can just picture all of them on their little tricycles fighting because they're all just little children. Sorry.
So yes, humanity has some healing and some recognizing to do. But the way that we do that is we simply claim our truth. And the more that I've been on this journey, the more I've started to realize it's not about fixing something within myself. I am intrinsically whole, but it's about recognizing those things that aren't real about me, right? My narratives about needing validation or needing safety or whatever, those came as a result of certain life experiences, but they are narratives. I now, living as a woman who has had a good, stable economic background now because of the jobs that I've had, the background that I've had, and living in a safe place with a family, those narratives no longer serve me. So why should I hold on to them? I don't need the immigrant girl narratives. And at the same time, I can hold myself in compassion when those things come up. Right. So if they come up, it's about recognizing them and simply holding them. Simply holding space is all it takes to really start releasing into our truest state. And actually, I've played with this, not just doing this with, psychological, mental, emotional stuff, but even with physical things. So, for example, there was a time where I had some deep internal pains, and all I wanted was for it to be over. Right. And what is that? That's a form of clinging. right? So to push anything away, to pull anything towards you, all of those create states of internal tension. And I just wanted the pain to be over. And I said, you know what? Let me practice with this. So I shifted and I said, I'm just going to sit with and notice the pain. I'm not pushing it away. I'm not saying, oh, it's so great. I'm just noticing it. And it was really interesting because what happened in my consciousness is the pain was still there, the physical pain was still there, but I was observing it and I was in a place that felt very peaceful and calm, just noticing it. So it's not, regardless of what we're going through, whether it's a hard day, whether it's, an ache in the elbow or whatever it is that we're going through, we can bring that same stillness. Our stillness, our breath that anchors us to the present moment, all of these are tools to help us remember our innate state, what is intrinsically and forever ours. And the truth is that when we forget that at the deepest level we are one and that we are fully interconnected, that's the stuff that leads to fear. If I fully accept oneness as a guiding principle for my life and I allow it to penetrate every part of my life, I would never feel bad that someone else has more money, has some other accolade that I don't have, has a better looking husband, dog, child, whatever, whatever it is that they have. I would never feel like that takes away from me, right? There's only that spirit of celebration, like you were talking about earlier, Whitney. And at the same time, I also never would have to worry if I do need to sleep on someone's couch. And it's not that billions of people have to open their couches up to me, but the people who are in my ecosystem, who know me by name and face, those are the ones that, would be the ones who welcome me to their couch, just as I would welcome them to mine.
Yes. Loddie, I'll couch surf with you anytime. If we both end up on the couch one day, we'll ride it together. But yeah, I completely, and I've been going through some body and pain stuff, and it's exactly what you said. And here's where the inner child thing comes in. Is for me with pain, I had many times in my life where I watched something like a train wreck. It was like, oh no, please don't let this happen. And it happened, right? Like, oh no, this I'm gonna be, the girl that gets bullied. I'm gonna be this. And it played out. And your body is such an easy way to target it and be like, why are you doing this? You're bad, you're wrong, you're messing everything up. I can't do what I usually do because this pain is bad, it's wrong, it shouldn't be happening. And all three of those statements are not factual. There's nothing that could ever happen that's not supposed to happen. And if it's something that doesn't feel good, well, then that's our judgment around it, right? It's a process the body is going through, but also it's there to tell us something. Anything
Mm,
that's occurring that's not very pleasant is just giving us a heads up. Hey, just so you know, there's something not functioning well. When something is dysfunctional, there's going to be signs, there's going to be indications, whether it's in a relationship within your body, at your job. And often we tune it out, la, la, la. We don't want to notice it until it's so big we can't, right? Like a pain in your body where you're like, oh gosh. And then we just get mad at it. We're like, can you just get lost? Because I got stuff to do, you know? And it can be hard, but it's a powerful thing to just say, all right, I'm gonna let you do your thing. I'm gonna listen. What are you trying to tell
mm.
me? How do I honor this pain? How do I let it exist and not try to fight its existence?
Yeah, and when you said we fight it, that's exactly when I told you the story of the dark night of the soul, and I said like the literal like fist shaking to the sky,
God.
directing it everywhere other than looking within, right?
God.
Why is the universe doing this to me?
Right? Well, I think it's because of the way that we've decided to live as humans is we decide to do everything else except listen to what's true, which is our soul. And as long as we live that way, we're going to keep hitting. We push and we force everything. And when suddenly we hit these roadblocks, we're like, "Why? God damn you! I had all these plans." And the soul was like, "I never had a single plan ever. I've just asked you to listen. Your soul is always just hoping you'll listen. And when you get to a certain point where you've disregarded your soul and your heart, to me are akin, for so long, you're going to hit that rock bottom, whether it's through addiction, overworking, unhealthy relationships, not taking care of your body, pushing yourself to the limits. It's finally going to say, you weren't listening. We didn't know how else to get your attention, right?
Mm. Well, and most of us in life, right? The majority of humanity lives from a place of shoulds. And what I mean by that is there are narratives in place around what you should do with your education, what you should do with jobs, what you should do in your personal relationships. And so we live from this place where either we're trying to live into those narratives, someone else's vision for us, or we're fighting those narratives and still feeling them deep within, even as we try to live something different, right? Like, I have friends who, for example, are in their 40s and unmarried, and they made that choice, but they still feel like the should is in there, right? They're still fighting the should, they feel it. And I think that what the soul invites us to do, Whitney, is to recognize that there are infinite ways to play. And to find our own melody in this grand symphony means that we have to be willing to open up deep within and just play. And so that dark night of the soul story that I shared, that was just my deepest self saying, hey, you're asleep. Right. And what was I doing? I was doing the shoulds. And I don't regret those at all, right? It doesn't mean that that wasn't part of my path. That was a valuable part of my path. And all those experiences, the skill sets, the accolades, the business network, everything that I built, I can now apply in this next chapter of my life. I basically entered into, I'm in my 40s and retired but still working. It basically means instead of dreaming about, oh, what would I do if only I could retire? I just said, what would I want to do if I was retired? Just forget about retirement. What do I want to do? And let me just listen into that place that's really peaceful, that carries a deep level of joy. And the answers were surprising. The answers were surprising. I didn't know that I wanted to start a leadership development program for women. You could not have told me that a few years ago. I was already naturally doing it, but it would never have come to me as something that, I would chart for myself. It probably would have sounded too hard.
Yeah. Luckily, sometimes things you don't realize you're already doing something until you're like, oh, wait, I'm leading. Wow, look at me. It's funny how life will do that sometimes. You find yourself right where you didn't think you could go.
Yeah, follow the heart. It only leads you back to you, your deepest
Yes.
self.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, Loddie, if you would get that book off the shelf, Soul Writers, I'd like to take a look at, and I'm also wondering how much it ties in to what we're speaking about in terms of, because you said that these are storybooks for adults for their inner child, right? So when we were talking about the shoulds, right? And you're speaking to you have friends in their 40s who are single, unmarried. Well, I'm single. I just turned 40. And what I've learned to do, and because I'm wondering if this is what the book is a little bit about, is I've had to talk to my inner child because my inner child says, I know that it's okay to be different, but I also thought I deserve to be loved. And I don't know why I'm not. So, and then it says, well, just because you don't have partnership doesn't mean you're not loved and doesn't mean there's not love. So I've had to have those conversations with my little self because you can't deny how you feel, right? There's nothing wrong with being single at 40. In fact, it's being more embraced every generation, especially this one, to, wait until something is actually of value to you, not just doing it because we don't have to anymore, especially as women. I won't go off on this, but women don't have to be married like they did 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? So we have
Mhm.
choices, but we do still have this story, this narrative of if you are lovable, you'll be married. If you're good enough, you'll have a partner. If you don't have a partner, it means something's wrong with you. That
Mm.
all of that harkens to our inner child because those are messages we get early in life, right? Which is, well, you better fall in line and follow suit because you don't want to be weird. You don't want to be different because you should have all the things that good people have,
Check the
right?
boxes.
Check the boxes. So I'm wondering what story is in this Soul Riders, and is it sort of that idea, or is it conversations with your inner child? Is it ways to talk with your inner child?
So, great question. So it's all in the form of narrative. And like I said, I didn't plan this, but the first one basically um, became a story of a man who was going through tremendous and painful loss, and then was finding at the end of that loss something much deeper. Um, and the reason I think, right, because again, I have to say that part of this is me learning as I'm going through the process. Like I didn't set out to write a series for inner child storybooks, it just happened. But one of the things that I noticed is that each of the narratives has deeply human stories that we can all connect to, but they're all very specific. You're literally walking someone's life with them, and you're also walking their spiritual growth and how that shifts over time. And the story has some interesting, fun, kind of mystical fantasy elements that I won't spoil. But I think that there's a power in that because if I just go up to someone and I'm like, okay, let's do some inner child work, tell me all the hard things you've ever been through, and let's dig right in at it. There's a different part of the mind that you're actually engaging when you go into that space. And it's actually asking the intellectual mind to try to lead the journey. When you go to a place of stories, which humanity has used for thousands of years as a learning tool, you're actually opening people up into a space that's more playful, right? I don't have to have my ego, my intellect, my walls go up. I'm just reading a story from someone else about something interesting. And how can I sit and play with that story? Now, we do have, as part of the storybook series, each story has some reflection questions that help us kind of bring that back. And people can choose if they want to do that or if they just want to sit with the stories themselves. But one of the reviews that I enjoyed that someone wrote about the series was that the stories are somehow incredibly unique, right, to the story itself, and yet incredibly universal. So they're meant to touch us in a deeper place because it's the heart that's listening to the story and then gently starting to let go of some of those shoulds that we all live through, some of those narratives. It's starting to loosen a little bit, and that's all it is. And it's a very gentle form of leadership play, of spiritual transformation. Um, and it's beautiful. And I'm just glad that I was listening for the melody that particular day
Oh,
to kind of start the journey.
I love that. Listening to the melody. Everything's a song. How beautiful is that? That these things that come to us are a song.
When
Ooh.
I know your listeners can't see this, but I was just going to say, I literally mean like when it's like a storybook,
Yeah.
literally it's a storybook.
Loddie, what a fantastic creation. And I want to just acknowledge I'm always in awe of people who write stories because look behind you. You have these books that they used to just be in your mind. They were once just a story in the ethereal realms and you brought them forward and now they're sitting there in all their glory. And that's a gift to the world. And I think it's remarkable when people do that because it's not easy to bring things into form always, right? I mean, you have children. It was it easy to give birth?
Birth is always, actually, that's one of the poems in Hungary. It talks about birth being always a messy process and no
It's
different is
messy.
like birthing ourselves. It's always messy and it's always got its own challenges. Like I had to learn a bunch of things about the publishing industry that I didn't know about. But I think what's incredibly important is just keeping that spirit of play there. So if we feel called, from deep within to create something, how do we enjoy creating it and then just let go? Right. So I have a friend who's like a senior executive in the healthcare industry, and this is our classic mindset, right? Being like business women, analytical women. She's like wanting to know if it was successful based on metrics. And I was like, that is so a different space. That is not, I would never have done it if that's what the project was, because I already know what like the average return is on things like books. That's not why you do anything, right? So again, to be in that space where we're just willing to be part of co-creation and not cling to it. It is what it is, and who wants to find it and needs to find it will find their way to it.
Absolutely. And everything that we put out, once any artist, which anyone who creates, whether it's a song, a book, a podcast, a work of art, a painting, you put it out and it takes on its own life. So trying to micromanage it and be like, well, it's only good if it's successful and this and that. You have to allow it to be what it's meant to be. And I remember one time I was having kind of a little meltdown because when I first started my podcast in the first year, I was getting very few listeners, very few downloads. And I shared that with a beautiful guest. And she said, Whitney, it's important to remember that you can never know the ripples that are created from what you share with the world. It's not ours to know. We don't know who it will reach. We don't know who someone who one day is having their dark night of the soul and they just happen upon your book and read it. And you might never know this because they never tell you, but it saved their life because they're like, oh, this is normal how I feel. There's something going on that just wants to be communicated, heard. wow, that's remarkable. I'd never considered that, right? So we don't know the ripples, and it's not ours to control.
Yeah. It's the creation process itself that's the gift. So
Yeah.
while we're in the creation process, the things that are fun, the things that are challenging that we learn from, that's the gift. And then you sort of set things on their merry way and just see what wants to arise from that. Like with the Know Your Worth transformational leadership program for women, there's these amazing people. I don't even know how I met some of them who just started coming into that space and saying, we want to be a part of this. Wait, we want to co-create. Here's some ideas I have. Here's something else that I can do. And so it's got a life of its own. We can't, if you want to ground your ego on things that you do, you're never going to be satisfied. We know that from the world's like richest people. There's never enough. But if you go into it just saying, how do I really enjoy and lean into the present moment, even the parts of it that are hard, then life surprises you.
Totally, in the most miraculous ways. And I have to give a shout out because to me, all of that embodies the divine feminine. The idea
Mhm.
that the purpose of life is just to express, not for any specific purpose, not for any specific result or any specific form. It's just to express and delight in the creation. Yay,
Mhm.
look at all these amazing things. Oh, wow, this happened and this happened and wow, this happened. Just that to me is the true nature of what life is. It's just a celebratory experience of expression. And we've lost touch with that because we've very much been in the more masculine, which is like, no, it's supposed to fit in this exact structure. It's supposed to look this exact way. It's supposed to have this exact result. And then we created this thing, which is successful or failure. But everything is meant to be free, right? Everything's meant to be free, including our creations to be whatever it's meant to be. Because when you think about it, if you get mad at something you created for not being successful, that's like having a child and being like, what are you doing for me lately? Right? Like, why aren't you better building blocks? I don't know how I feel about this. It's like we have to be open to things being what they are. And I think that humanity is capable of that. I think that that's why I believe the reintroduction of the divine feminine into all areas of society is so important because it's such a more vibrant way to live than
Mhm.
all these structured ways where we say, nope, that wasn't any good because nobody liked it. And if we all just created openly, we would just be collaborating. We wouldn't be trying to like up one another, compete. I think it's possible. And I call it the divine feminine. That's why I focus on that because it's this energy that is just about no form, no judgment, right? But we also need the masculine because we are creators and we say, okay, let me give you a little bit of this fairy dust to bring your imagination into existence, but let's not have any specific terms about it. And then we can all be having a good time, right?
And that's the magic of it, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, being able to yield into what the moment calls for.
Yeah.
So I've talked a lot about this yielding, this surrendering process into what wants to come forth in business ventures, nonprofit ventures, etc. But then actually proactively creating those things, going into a space where you're talking about those things, the doing surrounding those things, that's also part of it. And you're just shifting the different sides of you. And it's sort of like, one of the reasons that women still, after all these years, we're sitting at like whatever, 74 cents on the dollar to what a man makes for the same role. And literally, like the Department of Labor has gone and looked at the data and said, no, there's no actual, even once you adjust for things like years of experience, education, et cetera, like there's just a discrepancy. Women's labor is inherently undervalued. That's not just about waiting for processes and systems to change. That's not just waiting for companies to rewrite the way they do things or government to step in. That's about the way that we step into those spaces, right? Women are actually less likely to negotiate, or they won't negotiate as assertively. They won't use some of the same approaches.
Yeah.
So there's so much of what you said about stepping into our whole selves and embracing our whole selves, including our divine feminine, that really helps us get to that place where we can actually achieve transformation in the world, starting with ourselves, not just waiting for systems and structures to change, but changing from where we are. And I want to share something fun with you because I know you'll like this. Um, so as I would write a story from Soul Riders, right? And I'm just listening. I'm in that heart space. I'm allowing these words to flow, these characters and their stories to build. I noticed that at the end of the stories, the heart space would get quiet, like the equivalent of a blank page. And then a different storyline would come in. And this storyline used this feminine pronoun of she, but the energy behind the she was a capital S. And so there is this fascinating master storyline that weaves in at the end of each of the individual stories that's just on a whole other plane. Like I can't even explain it to you. But I'm always very curious what's going to happen with the master storyline when I go into that quiet place of creation.
Oh, how fun is that? And
I
I
knew
mean,
you'd like that.
do you ever feel a little like there's like some inspiration coming through, like whether it's ancestors or spirits or anything that's kind of joining to collaborate with you in this writing? Do you ever feel like it's inspired?
So I consider inspiration to be any time we go into that open heart space. And because in my personal practice, I really don't go into a place of concept. So I'm not like labeling or identifying. I don't have substructures for what it is that I'm noticing. Like I know in spirituality, there's lots of like terms and words that people use to describe different things. But what feels most true for me is to say that I'm releasing myself into that open space of potential, and I'm just listening for the notes that my heart is able to pick up. And whether that's the deepest self is writing or whatever, whether
Yeah.
it's ancestors or others, like I couldn't tell you because I don't have those concepts. And I think in the
Yeah.
unitive space of oneness, like it in its most innate form, there's one beautiful space of potential and consciousness that we're all sharing. So we can have lots of different names for different forms of energy within that. But for me, what's most powerful and transformative is to just merge into that space of open consciousness.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'm just kind of bringing that up because I feel, well, because of course everything is connected, but you and I are here. Like there's a you and there's a me in this experience. And I do believe that within the whole, as they say, it's like the ocean, right? There's little ripples and waves, which are various expressions. But I just wonder a little bit if the energy that is your dad comes through sometimes, because I've seen that a lot with people who have passed over parents or loved ones who will just like, he's like, what about this? But I'll leave it. If you don't align with it, you don't align with it. But that's just like kind of what I pick up on. But yeah, I mean, collective, sure, yeah, that too. But I'm just curious if he was like, I think I could do a good thing with this story. What about this? Just a
You
thought.
know,
Just a thought.
it's a fun thought. It's a fun thought. I mean, it's not the way I internalize it, but when you're talking about things that transcend human intellectual understanding, everything's only ever a pointer. That's why even when I said earlier, you can call it your deepest self, your highest self. Technically, those sound like two opposite directions, but they're just words. What do words actually do for us? It's about sitting in that space that actually gets us what's already ours.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you pointed out that there is this beautiful ebb and flow and this yin and yang of letting ideas come to us. But how many people have sat with ideas and they've never come, they have to be born. Like we said, we have to give birth to them. There was a book that I read that said how many beautiful ideas sit within somebody but never come to light. Like any composition of music or art piece could have very well not been expressed if the person hadn't moved into that place of actual masculine creation, right? So it is this beautiful, you have to be feminine enough to receive the inspiration and in your masculine enough to do the work because sometimes it takes hard work. As much as we're calling this a lot of, you have to follow guidance, the time comes where you have to put some grit behind it to bring it in to the physical, right? And I felt that I got that message this year. Like I pulled a card in the new year and it was yang saying like this is actually a time for you to be more in your masculine energy. And another card I pulled, Secret Shaman Oracle deck, was the Hunter, which said, yes, you're very determined, but you are going to have to do the work to forge the path, is where you're at now. You've dreamed a lot about it, you've seen it, but you're actually going to have to do some work. Because
Mm.
again, there's this beautiful balance of I'll sit and wait. I'll sit. And then it's like, okay, yeah, but you also have to like, it's not going to just happen sometimes, right? You have to do the work behind it. So again, and the more you're attuned with yourself and guidance, inspiration, the more you intuitively know what time it is for you.
Mm. You're so right about that, Whitney. And I think sometimes the term surrender or letting go, people think like, oh, that must be a thing you do and you sit up in the Himalayas really quietly where no one else is, and that's what you do for spiritual growth. But the truth is that surrender is just an invitation in every moment. And as you do, you're also surrendering to what that deeper guidance within you wants to share about pace. And you'll start to feel like a fire start to percolate within when you need the energy to move something forward. Like I remember when the concept of know your worth shortly after I had left my role, I'd shared it with my husband. And, he was used to being this like proactive businesswoman. He was like, okay, so are you going to put together a business plan? When are you going to launch all this? And I was like, no, it's not time yet. And he was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You already have the plan. You already, and I was like, yeah, but it's not time yet. So
The gestation
yeah,
period is
exactly.
real.
I'm just letting you know we're just 6 months in. Okay, so you gotta wait.
Not,
So
timer's not
yeah,
going off yet.
like you said, like that energy comes from deeper within to say that it's time to shift. And what we sometimes do, especially people who are trying to be in this space of spiritual growth or development, is they might feel the energy from the inspiration and then they feel the shoulds start to come in. Oh, I should do something with this. I should do it by this time. It should look this way. It should. And the should energy is a very narrow energy, right? It's all about the past. It's all about narratives of what others think, what you think needs to happen, how something is supposed to take form. And so allowing ourselves to really fully be in a state of surrender includes surrendering how something looks, when it comes out. And just know that if it's for you and you stay in that energy of stillness, you will know when it's time to go. You will know because you'll be in the middle of doing it.
Wait a minute. It's already
All
happening.
right, there's a poetry book here under my bed. Where'd this come from?
I love it. I love it. Loddie, well, this has been so much fun getting to meet you, getting to chat with you. Your story is remarkable. Your work is incredible. So thank you for being a guest and thank you for bringing all this beautiful work into the world.
This was so much fun. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you for being a voice that's so authentic and letting people see that it's okay that the journey of birth is painful and challenging at times. It's also beautiful.
Yes. And Loddie, if people would like to learn more about you, get your books, how can they find you?
You can find all the good, interesting, outside the box things I do on my website. It's www.docfoose, so DOC, Foose like goose, but with an F, .com, doc.foose. And we have actually there a fun wall where people can post their own vision for the world. So we have something called the Imagine Road. And so you can put your own brick in the road. We're all imagining a bright new future and we're creating it together because the past doesn't decide what the future looks like. We do.
Oh my gosh, you just have so many amazing facets of cool things. That's so great. I love it.
We'll
I
have
love
to have a
it.
whole other conversation sometime. We need to get
Yeah.
into the other
Oh,
stuff.
there's lots more apparently, and there's going to be more every year. So we'll have to reel you back in.
Sounds good.
All right, Lottie, well, have a beautiful rest of your day, and thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you.